Hello party people and welcome to Hong Kong. Now I usually try to take you outside to pretty sights when I do these, but today it's really foggy, it's very humid as well, like sweat through your shirt weather. And I'm only got like 2 days left here and I got a bunch of things planned for the last 2 days, so wouldn't have enough time to do an office hours otherwise, so I figured I'd just take you into my hotel. Loving Hong Kong, having a fantastic time here. Also did Shanghai on this trip. And one of the things, Hong Kong is very much what you think it is. If you're an American, it matches exactly what you've seen in the movies. It's kind of New York meets Blade Runner. So it's cleaner than New York, but it's also more dystopian than New York. But one of the things I like the most about Hong Kong is the bars, actually. The bars have been really cool. Last night we hit a few bars, and Penicillin was my favorite. If you search for Penicillin Bar Hong Kong, they've got a phenomenal like molecular gastronomy kind of thing for drinks. It's very scientific-ish. And the drink that I was hammering last night was loved clothes last, as in like the clothes that you love the most last you the longest. It is a wild drink. You look at the ingredients and you'll understand what I mean by that. So let's go take a look at your top questions from PollGab. The top question is from MyTeaGotCold, who says, are there any signs of brain drain from SQL Server to Postgres? It seems that every SQL Server guru agrees that Postgres is better, even if SQL Server pays them more. In terms of signs of brain drain, I suppose the thing that you would probably look at is the reduced number of blogs, YouTube videos, things like that about SQL Server. There is definitely a serious drop in the number of blog posts about SQL Server over the last few years, but I don't know that I would say that people are necessarily moving to Postgres. For SQL Server bloggers, you said, or gurus or whoever, I think a lot of them are also moving out to other things like data science, BI, artificial intelligence. Just because when you get really good at something, then you tend to move on and go discover other things as well. Next up, Frozt asks, do you have a checklist on decommissioning an old SQL server? I do not. The big thing, of course, is just backups. Take your backups, and then there usually isn't a cost for leaving a VM's image around for a while. Just leave the thing on. What you'll often find is that people used something once a year for a report, and you'll need to go power the thing back on in order to get something out of there to figure out how to run the report on the new server. Next up, Mike says, Brent, you mentioned that you're going to update the recorded classes in 2024. Is this still true? Yes. If yes, which ones do you update and when to expect that? I've already updated the Mastering Index Tuning class and Fundamentals of Index Tuning and Fundamentals of Query Tuning. And then Mastering Query Tuning is coming in April, if I remember right. Might be May, but I know MIT is already done. Next up, Mike asks, we know read committed is the default isolation level and statements locks are taken on a statement level. What happens when you issue begin transactions and then you run many SQL statements before you commit? Run an experiment, right? You're a big person. You can type begin tran and then do whatever you want to do to see what locks are being taken. My favorite way to look at that is with SP who is active, get locks equals 1. SP who is active is a phenomenal open source stored procedure that will tell you what's active on your SQL server right now. And then that's one of the best ways that you can learn. By all means, go get in there. Whenever you have an experimental question like that, where you go, what happens when you do this? Do that, and you'll learn. It's pretty, and it's also free. Ha ha ha! Woo! Or you could pay me, I suppose. If you want to pay me, you can go take my Mastering Index Tuning and Query Tuning classes where we talk about that subject. But why not just go try that? It's really easy. Next up, RoJo asks, if a nightly CheckDB fails, how do I approach recovery or validating data? go to brentozar.com/go/corrupt, where I have a checklist on that exact topic. I teach you, here's what you do in order, here are the phone calls that you make, here are the emails that you send. I did that because whenever corruption strikes, it's an emergency, and I'm usually booked 2 to 3 weeks in advance when I'm not on vacation. And I got tired of clients saying, hey, I have corruption right now, what should I do? So I just wrote out that checklist and I give it away for free to everybody. brentozar.com/go/corrupt. Next up, Eugene asks, if I wanted to run the Stack Overflow database as a home lab on a laptop, what specs would you recommend? So it depends on how large of a database you want to run. If you go to brentozar.com/go/query-stack, brentozar.com/go/query-stack, I've got a small, medium, and large versions, and I've even got a micro version that you can run on a Docker container. Obviously, the larger of a database that you run, the more hardware that you're going to need. In the mastering classes that we run at brentozar.com, we tell you that the bare minimum is 4 CPU cores and 30 gigs of RAM. So it gives you a rough idea. We also use one of the larger ones, though, too, databases. Justin asks, are you a biphasic sleeper? What is your optimal nap time and length? I don't know what biphasic means, but me with my my private school upbringing, I suppose, breaks it down into 2 words, bi and phasic, or 2 Latin terms, I suppose, bi and phasic, which means 2 phases. And I would say if that's all it means, then yes, I take my regular sleep every night, and then I have a nap most days, and my naps are usually 45 to 60 minutes long. I don't have to set an alarm, I just wake up and off I go. The way I kind of think of it is like a siesta, like in Spanish culture, it's very common to take a siesta in the afternoons. I'm much well aligned with that. DataBarbieAdministrator says, could you create a blog series? I didn't have anything to drink before I came out here. Could you create a blog series on well-known SQL Server best practices that are now outdated, explaining why and any alternatives? No, I tend to not take requests for blog posts. I have a strategy of things that I need to build in order to accomplish certain things. So I tend to not do that. That wouldn't really fit with my strategy. What I would say is if you see a hole in the market for a blog post or blog series that you think lots of other people would like, that's your sign to go create that. That's your sign to go in and start doing that work, and then you can become popular as a blogger as well. It's also a great way to learn too as well. Next up, Fermin says, hi Brent, what do you think about future career paths for database administrators? Are we moving to modern full stack or data engineers? I get this question all the time, and I don't understand where it's coming from. For example, if you're a developer, you don't go, well, are developers dead? Well, what should I do next? There are always going to be talking heads telling you that your career is doomed. They make money when they get clicks. It's just not true. So I don't know where to go with that. I don't know why people keep asking that. I don't know what dumb talking head is saying that. There you go. corelevel asks, hi Brent, in your opinion, what's the minimum table size in pages to start adding indexes to it? When you create the table, put a clustered index on every table. Then I teach you how to do that and how you choose those columns in my mastering index tuning class. Now the second part of your question is you're like, yeah, but what about other kinds of indexes? When do I revisit it over time? What you want to do is always know what your most resource intensive queries are, and then what indexes do they need? I've seen situations where a really tiny table rose to the top of somebody's biggest, ugliest queries chart just because they were sorting it all the time. Think a list of countries or a list of states that isn't cached. You may need to sort that. And so that's where you want to look at your most resource intensive queries. Don't go to the tables first. Next up, ChompingBits asks, how many of your customers are using Kerberos for authentication? I have no idea. I don't do any security work. And in fact, it's prohibited in my contract. You're not allowed to hire me for security work because I hate doing it. Next up, Jonathan says, what do you recommend for the number of databases for a certain size on a single disk? And he means volume, really. I've always ballparked around keeping 2 terabytes per volume and adding another volume when that one fills up. But lately we've had a lot of smaller databases. It sounds like you've got 10 or 20 years of experience with databases and you haven't gone back to training again. The reason that I say that is it's very common in the cloud for the IOPS numbers and your throughput numbers to be tied to volume size. You don't want to break up into a bunch of small volumes, like putting your databases across a lot of small volumes. You want large volumes. And every cloud provider has their max. Like I don't remember offhand what Amazon, Google, and Microsoft Azure's limits are per volume, and it changes all the time. But you want to look at what's the most amount of throughput you can get and what drive size do you have to be at, what volume size rather, do you have to be at to get there. That's what influences how many databases you put on a volume or how much data you put on a volume. You may need to break that across whatever the sweet spot in throughput is. Miles asks, how important is archiving data? We see history tables growing from gigabytes to terabytes. What problems might we run into if we don't archive the old data? When people ask and people say it's really slow to query this table, the first thing that I'll ask is, do you have good indexes on it? Let's go look at the indexes on there, because often the indexes just don't even support the queries. For example, if you're looking by customers and you have a ton of archived customers in there, if you know the customer ID number or their name and phone number, you can dive bomb straight into those rows regardless of how many extra archived rows there are in the table. When database administrators talk about archiving, they often think they're going to move the old data to a separate table. But then the problem is the users keep saying, yeah, but I want to query that data. And when you put it into a separate table structure, that's really difficult. So when you say what problems might we run into, the one I run into the most is people think they're going to archive data and still somehow query it the same way as if it was in the primary table. That just doesn't work well. Next up, let's see here. Miles asks, when there's blocking, the application team asks what lock called the blocking. Is it okay to collect lock info? What you want to do is either attend, depending on what you can fix, mastering index tuning, mastering query tuning, or mastering server tuning classes. And Miles, I say that in particular to you because you had like half a dozen questions that you entered this week. It's very likely that you're at the point in time in your career where you need to start attending training. In my Mastering Index Tuning class, I teach you how to solve it with index changes. In my Mastering Query Tuning class, I teach you how to solve it with query changes. Mastering Server Tuning class, I teach you how to solve it with server tuning, server changes. And in each of those, I tell you how to collect the information that you need. So time to start checking out those classes. Steve asks, hi Brent, is there ever a use case to have a non-clustered index created on the clustering key? For me, no. The only kind of query where that comes in useful is if you need to read a lot of those clustering keys, not the other columns in the table, just the clustering keys. And I'll give you an example. Count distinct ID. Well, if you're going to do a count distinct ID, you need to scan through all the IDs very quickly. The fastest way to do that would have a non-clustered column store index on those IDs. But when I see a pattern like that, I'm like, why are we running that query so frequently that we need to tune that? That's probably something that we should be examining. Why do we need this data? Let's see, we'll do a couple more here. Gustav says, what's your opinion of Copilot for Azure SQL DB? I took one look at just the announcement post, and I scratched my head there just as a coincidence. I took one look at the announcement post and I said, it's a really interesting down payment, but it's got a really long way to go. I think there will be a time in the future, 4 or 5 years from now, where that's useful. But right now it's just kind of a down payment. Businesses can't really rely on that yet, given the extraordinarily limited feature set and capabilities. And it was so small right now that I didn't even think it was worth it to write a blog post showing the challenges with it. I'm intrigued by large language models and where they're going. It's just way too early in their development life cycle to really bet the farm on it. Nothing against it. It's just not very smart yet. Next up, Steven says, hi Brent, we have a query which runs daily. It inserts a recursive CTE into a table. Our monitoring tool shows the plan changes every time and it has a different plan handle, but all the plans have the same hash. What would cause a difference in the plan handle? This is kind of beyond what I can guess just via short questions like this. I would kind of want to see the plan, because I'm not really sure what you're talking about. I don't know what problem you're trying to solve. If it's a query that runs every night, just runs once a night and that's it, it's not going to stick around in the plan cache. So you're not really worried about plan reuse, so who gives a rip about the plan handle? The plan hash, if you're tracking from one occurrence to the next, should be more than enough to get you the information of seeing how the plan changes. But who cares what the plan handle is? It's not like you're going to do anything with that. Ganesh says, hello, using the Excel source in SSIS. Unfortunately, I don't use SSIS, so I can't give you any answers there. What you probably want to do is either post it on SQLServerCentral.com or DBA.StackExchange.com. Post on one of those two forums. Jim says, I'm through half of the Brent Ozar Season Pass bundle, but I'm looking for guidance with excessive context switching in SQL Server. Can I get a link to find where to review this? Nope, I don't have a class on that. That's one of those extreme edge cases where I haven't seen it in the last 10 years as a problem at any of my clients, so I wouldn't want to build training material on something that I don't ever see as a problem in the wild. Yeah, I'll stop there. And I don't think you're ever going to find a training course on how you go about fixing that. Just Google SQL Server context switching. You're going to see a few summary posts from Microsoft. Start going down those roads. Let's see here. Next up, we'll do, let's see, Miles had another question. I'm not going to answer that one just because Miles, it's time to go to training. That's about the end of that. Nintenbob says, do you have any experience or thoughts on using SQL Server 2019's UTF-8 collation support? Not at all. I haven't touched it. I don't usually get in, because changing collation isn't the kind of thing that I can do as an emergency performance tuner. And I tend, because my work's all around emergency performance tuning, I tend to focus on learning things that are related to that. I saw a couple of conference sessions on it. I didn't watch them. I'm just saying I saw that they're out there. I can't remember for the life of me which trainers did it. So what I would probably do is go to YouTube, search for SQL Server Conference and the UTF-8 data type, and I bet you're going to find information on there, like half-hour to an hour-long sessions that are free on YouTube. Next up, Moctezuma DBA says, I was recently told the index rebuild removes the 14-byte version control pointer. Who told you that? Who told you that? That's not true. That's not true. And in fact, it's just the opposite. What you'll hear from people when you turn on RCSI, some folks will say that you should rebuild all your indexes in order to add in the space for the 14-byte version control pointer. So I don't know who told you that, but that seems odd to me. Next up, Prod DBA says, storage for big data. What options are there for maintaining large databases over time without archiving? When you say big data, I think for the longest time, big data or very large databases, the term was used for databases with around 1 terabyte of data, and I think that's kind of archaic. I have clients with 30, 40, 50 terabyte databases, and it's not all that unusual. If you look at storage space that's available, even in Azure managed instances, I want to say that they went up to either 16 or 32 terabytes worth of size in a recent spec change. So if you were talking about 100 terabytes worth of data, and you say what options are out there that are available, sure, you can stripe it across lots of volumes. Typically, you tend to run into performance throughput problems if you need to scan that much data. When you need to scan that much data, that's where the solution starts to become sharding, where you split the data up into multiple SQL servers and you query the servers that you want from the application side. But what I would encourage you to do is make sure that you didn't have any terabyte numbers in your question, which makes me think it's probably not all that large. When a client comes to me and says, hey, I've got big data, normally it's in the 100 gig to 2 terabyte range. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, but it's not really all that large. I sit up higher in my chair when I start to see 10 terabytes. At 10 terabytes, I'm like, oh, this should be a challenging call. All right, well, we've been going for like 20 minutes here. My breakfast is, I say my breakfast as if it's just for me, but the breakfast buffet downstairs is about to open up, so I'm gonna go down there. The service at this hotel is freaking incredible. I don't know if it's just the people or if they also have facial recognition going on, but they know me. Also could be because I'm notorious. They know me everywhere in the hotel, and they always have like whatever I drink is appropriate there at the table. For example, at breakfast, they'll bring me a black coffee, espresso-based black coffee and Americano, and sparkling water. They just set that down. They're like, "Good morning, Mr. Ozar," which is always funny. And the other thing that I like about that is they let me go in before the buffet opens. They let me go in at like 6:30, and then they just sit me down in a corner and I can go read or whatever it is that I want to go do. Today I will be uploading the YouTube video. So I will see y'all at the next office hours. Adios.